Okay, can you all be quiet for a sec? Turner's going to do a little introduction, and I'm going to do a little...
Welcome to the finals of the 2025 DDI. Hope you all are enjoying the end of your month here. We should have a great finals debate on the affirmative from the KT Lab or Highland Park via the KT Lab, Camden and Layton.
Yeah.
On the negative, from the KT Lab, from Interlake and Marlborough via the KT Lab, Jerry and Adam. And thank you to our esteemed panel of judges, Kavneer and Michael, who are coming in as first years at Dartmouth of MBA and Berkeley Prep, and Spencer judging from Iowa. So, hope you all enjoy the debate. I hope everybody is taking the chance to flow and get in that little last bit of practice for the line-by-line stuff that I'm so obsessed with teaching you to try and care about. Best of luck to everybody involved. Hope you all have a good time.
What is your sound? Is everyone good for me to start? Great. The advantage is the red deal. Current infrastructure development is destructive and causes mass suffering. Redefining critical infrastructure of the Arctic is key to align with indigenous worldviews to prevent dispossession. The Red Nation 21. Critical infrastructure is repeated by the government to criminalize Australian people lands. The Canada claims to be in the way of pipelines. The way industry approaches land and water is different. Our critical infrastructure is clean water. The bears, the salmon, all of that is our critical infrastructure. We're trying to protect infrastructure. We depend on oil and gas pipelines. The critical infrastructure Canada has waged a decades worth of violence, demolitions, and harassment campaigns against Australian people to guarantee settler society's critical infrastructure. It's destructive projects to make money. Indigenous knowledge seeks to build infrastructure premised on methods of relationality that emphasize caretaking and balance. That infrastructure, the infrastructures we dismantle are not only those manifested in pipelines, rather the critical infrastructure we must undo the philosophy that drives materialist conditions. Red Nation is serious about building all. We have two paths: decolonization or extinction, and neocolonialism in the Arctic is driven by extraction, requires seizure and destruction of lands, while cementing an instrumental relationship with the land is not to exploit. Civil 22. Oil and gas extraction to make control the discovery of oil in northern Alaska and the Arctic has been one of the main drivers of geopolitical interest. Third and interest reflects the emergence of neocolonial extractivism accumulation based on the pressure over natural gas resources. Arctic rely on construction of physical infrastructure given colonialism, continuities, further economic development. The perpetuation of settler colonial logic of capitalism development constitute the basis of Arctic geopolitics as geopolitical hotspot of the world. The capitalist control over space reinforce a relationship with humanity and nature based on economic value of land and resources as the objects are small, similar to those of old colonialism. Subsume indigenous territories and activities under the logic of capitalist accumulation. The colonial project remodel the relation between humanity and nature as a mode of production. Neo-extractivism, and this is exemplified in the erosion of entire cities in the Alaskan Arctic. Dispossession only fuels further resource extraction, which creates a feedback loop of destruction. Decolonize the notion of conservation, therefore, must begin from the Arctic. Guys, 23. The Arctic is rapidly altering due to the climate crisis in Alaska. Indigenous Arctic populations confront homelessness. Rising sea levels are forcing migrations of entire villages. Homes and disappearing coastal towns are trying to preempt coastal erosion. Scientists documented failed attempts to build seawalls for decades. Towns will need to relocate as Alaskan natives. Bill about a climate day will carry forward activism to pursue environmental justice in Alaska. Native perspectives on preservation are intertwined with efforts to sustain sovereignty. Alaskan native environmental activism continues to mobilize the address the climate crisis. Indigenous Western grassroots movements provide leadership and support for indigenous sustainable communities. Conversation is a Western, but when approached from a decolonized standpoint, indigenous communities can create better environmental conditions for themselves, and sustainable growth is a guise for colonial extractivism, which guarantees imperialist exploitation of indigenous people and makes their impacts inevitable. The Red Nation 21. The world is producing fossil fuels, but not fast enough. Resource extraction is ravaging indigenous and other than human communities. The Amazon fire and burning over 2 million acres in the name of mining. Infrastructure projects like the pipeline that carries natural gas violate sovereignty. Extractivist corporations are investing billions in renewable tech to ensure they have a source of profit once the dirty energy is phased out in favor of clean sources, creating new billionaires. The U.S. backs right-wing coups and indigenous access to green energy sources like lithium profit and all ruling players. About it is therefore crucial that we imagine and organize for sustainable green and energy initiatives led by indigenous people. We must not replicate the injustices and inequalities between the global north and global south that exist under our current structure of global capitalism by simply replacing fossil fuel extraction with renewable energy extraction. Even with the transition to green energy, the colonial relation remains intact. This is called imperialism. Thus, we affirm the United States federal government should significantly increase its critical infrastructure in the Arctic through the paradigm of the Red Deal. Only a project of actively building decolonial infrastructure can resolve the toxicity of colonial geographies. LeDuc and Cohen 20. We do close the ecological lapse indigenous bearing the brunt of toxicity crisis as a result of accumulation dispossession. Despite severity, the future is not foreclosed. Using a path requires infrastructure not inherently colonial is essential for transformation. Pipe can carry fresh water as well as toxic sludge. Effective initiatives for decolonization must have infrastructure that is life and design, finance, drawing all community, city streets. Our future begins on building beyond winning infrastructure essential architect of decolonized futures. And abolition ecologies require displacing the state's abandonment of vital needs and replacing the market and non-profit industrial complex as the means by which essential goods are delivered. Burgess 25. Denial of vital needs is an organized abandonment. The non-profit industrial complex first stands in the market where the market fails. Non-profit sector can pick up stray pieces. Abandonment produces its own socially strengthened rewards. Living politics arises from our daily lives. It is known. We have no water, but all we deserve water. Everyone must have electricity. There should be toilets. Real politics is about knowing how many people you are willing to serve. Set a tone for establishing practice in elemental abolition, ecology, centered attention to most vulnerable, analyzing environmental racism means looking at past and present capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism have produced, and normative policy frames demarcate different modes of labor as forwards and backwards, only using a heuristic of development that views caretaking of the land as meaningful, allows us to reappropriate the infrastructure of capitalism within the Arctic to create a movement for indigenous liberation outside the bounds of the state. The Red Nation 21. There is no hope for restoring the planet's ecosystem without indigenous liberation. There is no turning back. Indigenous protectors and land defenders were criminalized. We have been marked for death. Indigenous peoples continue to caretake the land. Caretaking is labor, healing the planet, creating infrastructure that will replace capitalism. Caretaking is at the center of decolonization and liberation. We therefore look to infrastructure of caretaking. Under capitalist caretaking, unrecognized as form of labor, mutual aid, providing relief to vulnerable, paving the way for caretaking economies to replace crumbling global capitalism. Mutual aid embraces firm life by caretaking, rather than denying life and exploiting humanity. Caretaking can topple global capitalism. There's not some mystical vision where we go out and hug trees. A serious agenda for decolonization requires funding for indigenous projects. We must turn to indigenous knowledge and state-centered legal frameworks undergird every action the USFG takes, but are woefully inadequate for understanding the ecological, social, and political transformations unfolding in the Arctic. Scholars should engage in imaginative, future-oriented practices of critical Arctic jurisprudence. The Red Deal promotes, based off indigenous modes of exploration and world building, to create a better orientation towards every single living and non-living being in the Arctic. Schufert et al. 25. Legal imagination pointing to re-examine legal norms, open up legal imagination, materialized through a multitude of different epistemic interventions. Imagination of what we consider good governance, propose new modes of thinking in the Arctic, thinking of a speculative register, can reassemble legal sovereignty, expanding Arctic legal imagination to pave way for legal theory, founding figures of law, transpose their own visions of governance onto the international stage. Polar law, deeply rooted mindset overlooks constraints on potential legal interpretations, reflects imperial project, speculative legal practice invites us to imagine alternative futures, not just about responding to threats, it's about rethinking legal frameworks themselves and envision new possibilities for polar law, speculation through reconfiguration, move beyond confined speculative thinking is political practice to reimagine legal knowledge that can think beyond binaries. Is just to consider a system that respects indigenous knowledge, critical polar jurisprudence using reconfiguration. We aim to reimagine law, open register of speculation. Think of critical polar jurisprudence, critical polar law, emerge to reevaluate assumptions commonly held, deconstruct existing realities, conceptual superiority, conceptual superiority of state sovereignty. Theories of justice have been advanced for Arctic governance. Theorizing as a means of reconfiguration, assess why polar regions site of theoretical increase. Poles are being portrayed as areas beyond sovereignty. Ontological reinforces a tool of exclusion. Invites the thinking of environmental legal frameworks, political and theoretical engagement with governance cannot be detached from planetary crises. We argue the Arctic reimagining of all law could, can and should be in a broader planetary context, and any project towards decolonizing must first stem from putting the power to lead and govern in the hands of indigenous peoples. The adoption of the paradigm of the Red Deal prioritizes an unflinching position towards the end goal of decolonization that starts here, the Red Nation 21. The Red Deal is a new every generation of indigenous peoples wanting to restore relations like the ones in these pages. Justice stems from the land itself. The Red Deal emerges from experience rooted in our struggle. Our writing emerged from the grounded in our relationship with land and people. Indigenous people do not write enough, and when we do, others rarely listen. Why should we have to be on the precipice of mass extinction? If humanity were following indigenous people, we should not have to write for liberation. Our roles, revolutions, intellectuals, drafting texts, involve meetings with indigenous communities through Turtle Island and beyond. Drafters hold valuable knowledge and skills. The Red Deal wasn't drafted in a closed-door meeting, was written and crafted, created through dialogue, reflection, and action. The Red Deal inspires action, max mobilization. More writing and thinking, indigenous excellence, or rigorous engagement with indigenous knowledge happens in relation to the land. We do not prioritize intellectual and political traditions over indigenous ones. We filter and interpret politics through committed to indigenous political economy and futurity. As the Red Deal continues to be read, debated, and implemented, we ask it is intent not to be reduced to cultural window for addressing scientific programs designed by white experts. Indigenous knowledge is not parasocial, that applies to just one culture. Indigenous knowledge is rigorous and ever-changing. The knowledge we must share must be at the center of the climate justice program. Methods of decolonization and revolution aren't new, but this is because the Red Deal belongs to long-standing tradition of resistance. Given the planetary reach of mass extinction capitalism, there is no reason why indigenous revolution can't lead us to left failure to contribute to the global revolution. Red Nation is not asking for a seat at the table. It's telling humanity to listen. Don't take us seriously. Take our lead. Indigenous knowledge provide models that pose alternatives to mainstream ideas. We are ready to act. I'm good.
Can I have some paper, please?
How much?
What was that yours?
Yeah.
You good?
Oh.
Oh, you got it. Sorry, I thought that was
Hey.
yours.
I'm good.
Your first piece of evidence indicates that infrastructure are things like berries, bears, and salmon. How does the plan increase that?
Yeah, I think Leighton can do a better
So
explanation.
let's talk about the redefining of critical infrastructure. Those are examples of things that matter. So something that could help with, like, I guess berries could be like irrigation projects, infrastructure, stuff like that. The like Ludwig and Cohen card talked like water pipelines being good.
That makes sense.
The app is isolated not just the development of critical infrastructure, but redefining
Yeah,
relationship
that makes
between
sense.
critical
So your app
infrastructure.
talks about replacing capitalist infrastructure, which is toxic. What does the process of replacement look like?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily think it's a process of replacement, but rather reuse. The Leduc and Cohen evidence isolates that currently pipes that are used for toxic sludge and delivering it and causing the mass destruction of indigenous communities could instead be used to send water to those communities. What the act defends is decolonial critical infrastructure, which reverses the destruction of capitalism.
Your evidence indicates that, quote, creating infrastructure curriculum that will replace infrastructure capitalism.
Well, yes.
Is that only the is that
We think-
repurposing, or is that actually
There's
replacing?
also the creation of new infrastructure, obviously. We think the plan starts with the replacing of current capitalist infrastructure,
Okay, got it.
like the reuse.
Reuse. Okay, how are things like oil pipelines reused?
Our things that I think we just explained the ways in which they can be reused. You don't think that we defend every instance where capitalist institution can be reused. We think the one instance I say there are instances where capitalist infrastructure can be reused. I don't think we need to win oil
So
pipelines.
what about things like fracking? How's that
What about
reused?
things like fracking? We think that fracking would no longer occur or be prepared after everything is adopted.
So basically, the
Like the one I see doesn't repurpose all capitalist things.
So it repurposes some elements of capitalism and removes others.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Your evidence broadly is about Canada, so the affirms the paradigm.
Well, it's because
of
the Red Deal doesn't
Deal.
like the Red Nation doesn't believe in borders, so of course they talk
Okay,
about like.
yeah,
We also
other
isolate
groups.
that we've read multiple cards talking
Sorry,
about
that makes sense. I just
the
want to
Silva
ask,
20.
the AF affirms not just through like the direct consequence of the plan, but through its broader paradigm
Wait,
as well, right?
well, we only mandate the infrastructure part. Like we can't like
We'll
So
defend
does the
the
act-
right deal.
we'll defend the paradigm, but we can't mandate things.
Let's talk about that last part you read. You read that it has to first stem from the power to govern in the hands of indigenous people. The plan mandates that the federal government is one that does it. What about that places the power to govern?
Disagree with that characterization of the affirmative. The Red Deal has made a demand pertaining to what the government should do. The one AC subsequently listens to that demand and fiats the government via subservient to
So-
the indigenous.
It beyond the government becomes subservient.
Not
to indigenous
subservient
groups.
all the time. What the one AC is isolated and defended is that we
That
listen
makes
to the
sense.
demand they have
When-
made on this.
When is the government subservient to indigenous people and when is it not? As
Well,
per
in the
your
instance of the Red Deal,
In the
we
instance of the plan,
yeah,
they're
it's
not
just the Red
subservient
Deal.
to the status quo.
Duh.
Got it. So if like the Red Deal demands it, then the power to govern is in the hands of indigenous people.
Well, it's done by the state, but it's demands made by indigenous
Yeah,
groups.
the power to govern what the state does, which is what our evidence is scripted of, is placed in the hands of indigenous people, as per the bottom of the Red Nation Act.
Sounds good.
7 in case.
Sounds good. Seven, right?
So,
Shit, I need to fix the flow. Put this in the way. Give me like 1 second, actually. Something to this stuff.
Okay, is anyone else good?
Give me like 1 second. Alright, I'm good.
Okay. First off, to consult the United States federal government should seek prior consent with relevant indigenous groups in the Arctic as a precondition to whether the United States federal government should significantly increase its critical infrastructure in the Arctic. The paradigm of the Red Deal, moving beyond mere consultation to requiring consent as a precondition is key to indigenous sovereignty in the Arctic. Proposal 22, implementation of international legal themselves and ethical protection of indigenous rights in the Arctic, has suitable legal framework consent basis for cooperation overcoming colonial oppression of the state and cultural minorities, consent of legislative survey, but teachers' participation, co-organization, consultation, consensus is important, consent possible through fair participation, goes to passive participation, interactive self-implementation, seek to be free, prior and informed the appropriate means to clear representation, not able to guarantee protection of indigenous rights. U.S. implementation of FPIC is key to UNDRIP, gets modeled by states and indigenous people globally. Frederick 17. UNDRIP can protect the rights of indigenous people, and FPIC debate over legal status member states, implement bonus states, when FPIC is for rights after autonomous state sovereignty to ensure rights are protected, choose and use cascaded to guide influence lawmakers again on making new laws. Implementation of FPIC would allow internationally accepted standards for how state security. Our responsibilities, U.S. committed to indigenous consultation through the endorsement of UNDRIP, U.S. policy, law policy moves to move towards the review and consent required by the UNDRIP should be accessible and by the government can pass a core policy starting point for indigenous people globally to actualize the same. Team minerals. Interpretation, exploration, development, discovery, and extraction of mineral resources, U.S. Augustine. Exploration development means the largest support of purposes with the exploitation of specific mineral resources, deposits, exploration means identification, evaluation, mineral resources, deposits, exploration, exploratory drilling, judging other subsurface, excavation prior to determine the feasibility of the development. Violation, they defend the creation of infrastructures of caretaking. Their interpretation justifies minute substance of sensing, research, military presence, environmental cleanups, which creates unlimited burden. Minerals are key to unified negative art to weaken environment descent, to preserve clash and fairness. Advantage cover. The United States federal government should subsidize renewables, subsidize nuclear energy, implement a carbon tax, implement resource caps on fossil fuels and other relevant overconsumed materials, and ban the consent of minerals for green technology on indigenous land without consent. The plans quickly achieve sufficient decoupling, but is mutually exclusive with the act because the act dismantles capitalism or lettuce. 23. Efforts I should take to reduce the use of possible undergrowth can transform systems contingent on reforms first of numerical classification to involve the empirical model. Under the most aggressive policies of subsidies and renewable energy, nuclear power, carbon tax, and not compatible with goals that attempt to reduce the capacity reduction based on assumptions influenced by hegemonic discourses and compared to more aggressive policies than subsidies, carbon tax, and consider resource costs and fossil fuels and emissions turned out at the speed of the which growth in the world is more likely than new growth enable the conditions needed for climate transition to go as slower for forceful and fast to first slow. I don't believe that's what the second more realistic and worth fighting for. T8. Interpretation, it refers exclusively to the federal government, not tribal governments. That's Lucero 14. United States, it refers to the federal government, not a tribal court. Violation, the normal needs of the plan is led by indigenous groups. Insert gray. Prefer interpretation to justify a massive topic with science collaboration with Russia or China, security collaboration with dozens of states, and cooperation with single indigenous groups that shift the focus of the topic away from U.S. action in the Arctic to collaboration, which makes predictable negative preparation impossible. Politics. The United States federal government should ban the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act is a partisan support momentum, but passage in the Senate is not guaranteed to War 716. The Clarity Act is Senate to determine whether we can clearly the House Financial Committee Act Committee with bipartisan support of the Senate most of this building the passage is not guaranteed. RT development is politically and diplomatically costly, high financial costs, and competing interests. Query all 20. Financial social costs and high risk environment of a high investment costs, as well as high demand, political, social sensitivity, political challenges, highly contested perspective. The Arctic crypto regulation solves existential risk by mitigating exogenous threats. That's Walker 22. Recent innovation with large circulation, global digital point challenge about institutional legacy regulation was significant challenges arise in terms of wider external systemic creating its ability to accessible and society and health and normal manner. The pandemics with the fillers, climate terror, wars including nuclear can arise and after trades, we see financial regulation key, especially with the new global supervisor of global policy, including monetary stability. The perception that indigenous knowledge is something that the white settler has a right to perpetuates neocolonialism. Weaver 24. Western governments are increasingly interested in the value of indigenous ecological knowledge of energy, climate, the construction of indigenous knowledge is a universal good that anyone helps himself with the emerging hypothesis or discussion whether than its inherent materials of the materials something that goes to the construction of indigenous knowledge is a picture of knowledge and economical commodity that should be accessed strategically by anyone in the indigenous do so. Our alternative is indigenous sovereignty that creates a community of distance to settler logic and affirms land-based responsibility. Workers 21. Sovereignty is not a source of legal political authority, but a social and cultural way of understanding communities and concerns ontological belonging in context of the universal way in which the Western sovereignty and sovereignty contextualized sovereignty changes for community and per individual. T. Infrastructure. Interpretation development is the act of constructing or establishing any building, structure, or premises. That's San Diego Municipal Code 97. Development is constructing, establishing any building, structure, improvement, law, or premises. Violation of Red Deal's paradigm, which is the mandate of their plan, includes preventing material development of infrastructure, which is anti-topical. Insert gray. Vote neg. The interpretation justifies preventing building, which makes the topic bidirectional, possible to garner stable, unified net ground, which acts fairness and clash. Case. 1. The Red Deal votes neg. Anything that doesn't involve land back at the starting point fails to actualize change in Red Nation 21. Individual planning, if you're rolling climate change mitigation, adaptation, making further return of land, return taxes, land return to land trust, campaigns, and on-government taxing, giving back land to people for first land restoration. 2. Infrastructures of caretaking can't solve the climate crisis. It's global and the app takes way too long. 3. There is capitalist investment precludes solving climate change. 7 warrants of why capitalism solves sustainability. Plus, the rhetoric solely creates anxiety and makes action ineffective. Better 25. Shifts towards renewable AI represents will transformative revolution, bringing progressive complexity to renewable zone change, reduce emissions, providing economies and help achieve power generation under readily undermining possible. I'm working for ever slash caused by nearly 90% automation of the way let's driving global shifts in automation to manage power for which companies prior to sustainable and possible life, as well as addressing challenges effectively trade carbon first, as large amounts of difference in the by private investment competition, which reduce costs, and capitalism for competition, innovation, scalability, moving toward hyper-abundance, recycling and funds, with markets and the maximum efficiency, capitalism, seller adoption, and anti-capitalist feeding clearly, resist global alternatives, rhetoric, implies economy, studying, counterproductive, the evidence that shares discourage action without capitalism are already endorsed. There are achievements in climate change, flaming capitalism enemy. The rest of progress and fosters resistance to technology that rapidly reshaping. 4. Capitalism reduces wars through financial integration, interdependence, and democratization, but doesn't generate financial incentives for war because there are other factors that settle in 23. Wars are common in capitalist areas, great powers of war, the represent this, and both the number of wars and casualties described. A sharply majority of the research is maintaining democratic war, war very fluidly, safety, economically interdependent to it, wars. The progression analysis includes capitalism leads to peace, financial market integration, system, complicated with the capitalism, as a prosperity generated by the democratic peace, because political capitalism means stable the country. Who's the system go to capitalism, good way work is just for reasons that have nothing to do with systems, whatever. A reason the country wars escalation leading conflict by escalating combat with the threat of siege when the capitalist system wage wars not necessarily rate implications for reasons for action are capitalists. 5. Unsustainability is a fallacy. This card answers every neg warrant Bailey 2020. End the poverty, the global population living in extreme poverty, begin the funding of the phase of production, sped up building, 6% of population increase, running out of resources, only for research, not a fake nor no fix, the prices increase, the team of money creating center for innovation, new deposits, greater efficiency, the substitutes, and human power, the year, single non-renewable research, more abundant, protecting population, world population peak, and 1 billion decline at the end of the 21st century, low mortality, increasing urbanization, and the rising of economic freedom, start strongly growth at the end of the famine, and of famine, and agricultural productivity, greatly improve society, the methodology to fertilizers, the pesticides, to the world, the good church, and improve transport, sell or trying to create canopy increase the long piece of war with American flavor and generosity warfare to the planet's wealthy and economically intertwined and character of the capitalist space. 6. Growth and resource consumption are sustainable. Innovation will decouple and solve ecological crises and a transition to both fails and causes their impacts. Also 23. Rate of global population growth has been consistent with inconsistent decline, feudalism, advancement with weight, and capitalism. Only 14% of people live less than it's being will be necessarily for the trains society and rules and regulations. We hardly be enough to living status has declined with rapid emissions from 1992 up 2015 undergo as you underestimate the extent of technology and innovation can equal U.S. growth crop consistently increasing position agriculture enabled input the digitalization of goods and services of smartphones limited again holding materials so because we less than decoupling 32 countries of the same integration and active we have come to close running out of energy research only 25 times the British have with inflation the economic increase in minerals and I've been so stable because you go the country goes on like all parents there company I don't pleasure to tolerate and secret propaganda every big and ongoing small 7 capitalism produces poverty and famine empirically statistically proven settlement 23 capitalism is overcome hunger poverty from payments that occur under socialist grant payment I believe 80% of China and the Union economies have made a part of the planning economies as zero women economics poverty economic freedom and eliminate we don't know the economic dividend for warning government law and best the federal liberties coordinate investment and workers and practice serving their interests. Senate serving their interests. Yeah. I'll send it. Or I can send it. Okay, it's
Are you good?
Yeah.
Alright, status?
conditional.
That benefit, the advantage counterclaim is just captured.
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Let's talk.
Hypothetically politics.
Well,
We
hypothetically,
read a
or
link about spending. Is the counterclaim free?
I don't think we've done that. I think that we've said that Arctic development specifically trades off of
Okay, what's the warrant from the card?
high diplomatical, political, and social
that's the part of
sensitivity.
the what's the part of the top that says like high spending? That's the problem.
Yeah,
Like,
the counter.
Financial and social costs. Like I think that we've read
Okay,
an impact
I
that's
have questions
external
about
and we
the
can
case.
read more links. But
Okay,
it technically
what is
could be
C4?
more.
Capitalism reduces war. What countries will go to war if we're anti-capitalist?
What countries would go to war?
Yeah, what countries go to war?
Well, it says the Zillman evidence makes more of a general claim about capitalism decreasing conflict for several reasons. First is interdependence when countries trade with
I
each
understand
other.
the thesis coming from Zillow. What is the terminal to that? What countries are firing nukes in a world where we are non-capitalist?
What is the terminal?
Yeah, what countries are firing nukes?
What do you
is
mean
the
by
specific
terminal?
scenario? What is the specific scenario? I don't see a specific scenario, but rather just a claim that war is done. That's not a terminal impact. What is the specific scenario for escalatory war?
It said, well, I think wars escalating between great powers is certainly an impact. I don't understand what you mean by terminal impact.
I want to see 6, growth is sustainable. Is there any other warrant besides renewables?
In the Grosso evidence, it says that renewables are increasing in a world where economic growth is still increasing. It says,
Is there a warrant besides renewables?
it says crop tonnage has consistently increased, which is distinct.
Growing
We're
more.
building materials, consuming less metals.
Okay, so the warrant is, wait, how are we getting renewables and consuming less minerals? We need, you just said
Consuming
we're
less metals,
Oh,
instead of
metals.
steel, copper, aluminum.
Okay, but we're using renewables, which require metals to make, right?
I think renewables require rare earth minerals, sure. I think that this evidence is more about steel, copper, and aluminum, which are like release emissions.
What's the terminal impact of climate change?
What does that mean? Terminal
Does it
impact?
cause extinction? Is there an impact card for climate change? I didn't see one of
We
them.
haven't said that.
Okay, where do you think GAP has made a root cause came pertaining to climate change? I didn't see a card in the one I see that said climate was the reason for infrastructure failures. Can you quote me to it? You made an argument on the advantage counterclaim that says resolving climate change resolves, quote, the root cause for infrastructure failures.
We think climate change is bad because it hurts indigenous communities and because it causes a lot of bad things that causes suffering.
Okay, so climate change is bad because it causes suffering. Does extinction come first?
We haven't made a claim about that.
Okay, cool. The last card, CAP solves poverty. How?
Sure, that's the other
Actually,
settlement
I have-
evidence. It says,
I have a question that I need to.
So,
Can the alternative result in the plan?
so back to how it solves poverty.
oh yeah, so it says Well, this little bit of evidence is prescriptive of past socialist countries that caused great famines. Things like 8 million people died because of that. 80% of all people that have died in famines were in China and the Soviet Union, where they
Alright, so
were
past
anti-capitalist.
failures of socialism is capitalism good?
Yeah.
Alright. Team prep? I'll do a little bit, sure. Starting now. Alright, that's all.
7:45.
Yeah, my phone, I'll get ready to order in a second. Alright. Is everyone good for in order? Alright. Case. T. Infrastructure. T. Its. T. Minerals. The advanced power plan. The consult power plan. Set call. And politics. I've never seen so many papers move so fast in my life. What?
Infrastructure before.
Infrastructure is after case. So,
One more time.
one more time? Alright, sure. Case, T infrastructure, T its, T minerals, the advanced power plan, the consult power plan, the K, politics. Is anybody not good? Kyson, I don't care if you're good. Okay. On case, indigenous groups are experiencing the broad climate change now. Our relation with status quo development is untenable for native life. Only instead a shift towards relationality, the environment and development can solve. The world about is over the team that which best helps indigenous communities because they're the one on the forefront of climate change. 2, one of the words don't match the tag. Just say giving the land back is important. The other solutions fail. 2, if they're right about giving the land back is a demand of the right deal, then that would be an effective solution to the paradigm of the deal. 3, no impact. Case solve 2, we at least get to mitigate the turn. 2, don't need to be solved everywhere. Helping indigenous people in the Arctic is good enough. We have specific impacts about Alaskan native villages falling off the side of the earth now. 2C3 is all the capitalism stuff. 1, no link there. Plant can't mandate the capitalism destroyed. Red Nation proves capitalism is terrible for indigenous people. Where are the REMs coming from their land? Capitalism is unstable. A, profitability, renewable energy, expensive, and allows to prevent warming at the scale of speed necessary. Will come to 24. Research is not happening in the necessary basic key reason profit renewable development industry cannot compete with highly profitable lots of companies that distribute billions to shareholders or more and do may destroy the land. The saving capitalism is thus available. B, the course of law competition dissuades companies from seeking renewable alternatives. Research 25. BP, better green emissions, better back to also focus on oil is about BP, but capital at large and its inability to respond to climate course of law companies force out because of competition companies to maximize profits also use much more profitable than renewable energy no matter how productive. C, greenwashing companies will lie about doing green stuff. They'll do terrible things. Tesla mining tons of lithium while being green supposedly, both plus overproduction of more minerals, getting the minerals causing tons of CO2. D, capitalism does not foster peace. Hard 20. There was always all these arguments that empirical just don't happen. Countries trading with each other, fought wars over and over again. Russia, Georgia, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. We got government independence, cannot jump over power politics. That government independence is good because of the violent action, especially over the preemptive nature. Or in the times of war, it is elite switch suppliers here and is unable to foster peace because it is unable to overcome cultural and regional differences. All it's is a capitalist hack who is the bucket of the large corporation is his sole purpose in life is to just say that capitalism is great. And if it doesn't assume any of our war, it only assumes our war, so it doesn't assume any of our work about peers or against climate violence. It can use climate change that does not assume that it's colonialism. Only innovation fails will be on the advanced carbon. E, food security is inevitable under capitalist production. Small C17. 780 million people are living on an basis. Solutions leave intact the profit would have undergrading our food making. Everyone dependent on corporations. Capitalist production is a sustainable drive to profit. Capitalists have to lead to overproduction of food that is never delivered. Their capitalist markets are more efficient. Only works ever. By efficient, we mean making profit is in a highly oligarchical market. Food is treated as a commodity that no longer has value. While the models provided aid, they do not create alternatives. They require rivalry reaction to the food system. We cannot continue a failed model. And after it can't solve poverty, inequality is getting worse and worse. And even if they're absolutely good, like capitalists unable to solve poverty because it keeps going back to the rich. G, capitalism is capitalist decline is inevitable. Only they have to make the transition safe. It's about building infrastructure that makes their impacts inevitable. That's the Red Nation 21 on T infrastructure.
One, we meet the plan to develop six projects. Their violation is not the mandate of the plan. Two, ground duration. Develop requires the creation of structure building. LII, no date. Development of structure including building. Three, that includes sustainable development. SWG 17. Development of the artist sustainable development meets needs without compromising future generations. These four limits. Their interpretation opportunity includes acts with instead of negative teams to erase the bottom solvency gap against the base and arguing keyboard check. 5, ground their interpretation makes unique possible because the infrastructure activating the status quo is high functional limits like cabin check their office. 6, reasonability. Good is good enough. Anything else causes substance cried out and on the bottom of T. It's when we meet the determination says it's in relation to the United States. The affirmative development certainly is that even if the indigenous land is still by the United States. 2, government it means associated with Supreme Court of Mississippi. 19. It is associated with the thing originally mentioned. 3, prefer after all exploration and development has actors who are not the USFG involved. The government contracts have companies to execute the exploration that makes it over limited because virtually every app will eventually on top will be crossed by functional limits here. See net ground is better. Let them get links to the other actors and generate way more outputs versus tiny apps indeed crossed by reachability on T minerals. One, we mean the plans of infrastructure could be minerals. 2, countermeasure the determination of development from cars by the determination of development from the structure base. 3, crossed by the functional limits of 4, crossed by the reachability stuff. 5, their determination is over limiting almost no apps underneath. Their determination makes the app sitting duck every app would be drilling and be impossible. You have to ever win. And 6 is net ground, almost no negative ground on the determination because mining is the Arctic and the status quo is huge, makes this as impossible on the advanced car plan. 1, cases in this ad. 2, permanent the app and then any of the plans. 3, cancel the app. By the time that they have reversed climate change through their new tech, all the towns and lives will be gone. The plan is key immediate solvency. 4, can't solve the root causes of the cases. Capitalism, not native realism, not climate change. 5, permanent both. G energy is the form of leftist organizing. Interest that is fully compatible with the app for in D22. Transition is the problem of our time. Transition is the revolution to divide the movement. Seldom give attention to transitions of the black box between the present and the future. Whether that's a G and D coming over degrowth. 6, carbon acid nuclear fails. Structurally, we will circumvented by corporations. Nuclear takes decades to build. 7, links to politics. The spending will be active. And 8, innovation fails forever. Forever. We will keep innovating, but every time we innovate something, we then go buy more minerals and resources and get that stuff and make it cost way more CO2 emissions. Carbon dioxide will take forever. Sequestration always fails. Okay, on the soul car plan. 1, carbon must be potentially functionally competitive. Maximize the germane comparison, AFRs, and objectivity. 2, permanent carbon. Shooters of advisory not certain. It also equals all. Richmond 16. Shooters not conveying redevelopment obligation, no work compulsory plan. In fact, shoot is a recommendation. 3, soul land is all plan is set. Setting the plan is not taking digital land. It should start the carbon substance against 0. 4, other issues from 2 the F. In the carbon process on other issues. 5, permanent both. 6, suspended is set. Colonial structures get stuck in suspension over consultation. It will prevent you ignore issue. 7, FPIC fails. Carbon can't make that's how they do consultation and their own way to the US would be against it. That's the uniqueness of their benefit. Plus, other things like the UN and Canada should solve. 8, multiple words for do the plan and do the carbon when it results of the plan. That's legitimate. Lose all the plan and part of the carbon. 9, for the plan actually during the process. 10, immediacy key. Climate change is destroying cultures. Now, absent action, more digits are killed. The time the carbon process takes. 11, condos voting each year causes 2 easy tracks and makes it impossible for them to win because contrary advocacy make us debate ourselves. On to the set call. Framework 1. Valid the material concepts of the plan, the political rights of the red deal. Those cannot be disentangled. Both should be sources of bad offense, but over degree to critique. 2. Prefer everybody critique, decimate fairness, and because the gap can never go on offense. 3. For the bill. These all overcomes later our problem the status quo. Incorporating the structure development to provide indigenous groups to be able to save themselves while also rejecting close with mutually beneficial. 4. For the F and the L. Providing infrastructure that relieve pressure on indigenous groups are prioritized to line further decolonization. 5. Don't leave their cards or hide to say nothing. It isn't the regular paragraph of the red deal itself. It's just about how white people view indigenous knowledge as theirs, but it's not about the F because it mandates that we heed indigenous demands. 6. Settlement action is not ethical nor productive, but settles off on the lead of indigenous peoples to demand specific material solutions that elicit real gains. Bills 19. A starting point will be to accept the status of settlers. Second step is to question every settler should deploy their problems to the interest of indigenous peoples, identifying solutions and demanding they be addressed. Confronting instances of settlers with purpose. Settlers should insist these issues about all of us. Settlers afraid of overstepping should not do that from any colonial labor. Settlers have not only capacity but responsibility to act. And 7, all fails. 8, extraction is said. Rejection does not prevent the extraction of articulate build the infrastructure which characters is working to prevent capital suggestion can be the development. Instead, only the state has the available resources in order to build infrastructure. The art of indigenous groups caused by that's also all their offense on the politics is said. 1 per new bill, 2 per no means to the IA, not Congress. 3, even then the bill enters the bottom means no trial. 4, unique several link clarity is 2 by Ross of Hill, could be 717. 78 Democrats will vote over the Republicans to advance the clarity of the law, showing over by support backing for several Department Democrats and solutions for crypto bills. Growing block showing Republicans out of crypto versus tendencies of political force for the center for millions to influence target lawmakers, majority Republican who have pushed over crypto. 5, our policies are compartmentalized and the plan is popular. Charter 16. Full region relative austerity. There is little development. Polar regions cost of the president. Little PC is awarded or prestige. Low risk, high reward dynamics. Polar A boost to presidency. And 6, infinite Trump PC. Longwell 7-3. Republicans were opposed to having this come around. It's a very simple Trump demand, and they all felt like they were firm no's. And I said absolutely not. The Trump calling, controlling the poverty, pressure, peer pressure, Republican Party. Do whatever Donald Trump says you have got to do. 7, their backcard says financial collapse causes all the bad problems. So 8, Seattle calls backfire. It says the signal the dollar is weak and encourages seek alternatives. Version 25.
Stable currency, an alternative to U.S. dollar, linked to the weakening of the dollar. Back stable coins send the message that the dollar is not strong. Now, logically, the impact may seem possible to be added because they can choose what they want to go for. The 1 hour, and then 1 hour we get new answers, and even then the impact is ludicrous. It says that crypto coin will solve climate change and all these other kinds of stuff, which makes no sense in the abstract because the card doesn't actually say that. It just says that it could be good for financial stability, which means that the card above should apply. More cat bad? All right. We love cat bad. All right. Case. Capitalism destroys the environment in decades, same as Sugar 21. The system is unsustainable and quest for capital, which leads to production, causing environmental destruction, production, polluting systems, sincere search for tech, to percolate all the problems, capital is the root cause, environmental problems, environmental solutions, which lead the system to attack and not resolve the problem, but it reinforces it. And I'm good. Let me add that card to the dot real quick. So I'll start at the bottom. Last card. Should be sent in like 2 seconds ago. Alright. I'm good.
One sec.
If you need to get open, that's fine.
Okay, are you good?
Yep.
I want to start on case. You said capitalism decline is inevitable. The plan is key to speed. What card says that?
No. Capitalist decline is inevitable. The plan is key to resilience.
Why?
Right Nation 21. Well, we think that the infrastructures the plan builds are key to make sure that these indigenous groups do not die. We think that capitalism is inevitable. We think that these.
What's the word? Why capitalism is collapse inevitable?
We think that overproduction eventually means that capitalism will have to decline.
What card do you think says
One
that?
is
Right,
red
Nation
nation,
21.
21 evidence.
Can-
But
which-
block design
I
is
think it's
right.
the first one.
I
Okay,
can
which-
read you lines from it. You want me to?
I mean, you remember the one AC, but I think it's the first Red Nation card. It might be a different Red Nation card, but I know it's Red Nation.
Okay, that makes sense. You said capitalism does not prevent war. What's the word in that card?
That card talks about how trade can't solve. It also says that trade is more likely to cause conflict, specifically because these kind of trade because trade exists, countries want to go fight to protect their trade, so it causes more war. Like-
War to protect their trade.
No, war to protect their trade. People like countries who are connected with each other will preemptively try to protect their trade by going to war.
Why does war protect trade?
Because if you're scared that somebody's going to attack your trade, you will go to war preemptively to stop it.
What is it? Why would you go?
Because you care about your trade.
Why would two trading countries go to war with each other?
Well, first of all, we're talking about general trade cause of this. Secondly, it cites specific examples of like how I think it lists like 7 countries who have gone to war with each other despite trading with each other. I can go read the countries if you
Unlike
want.
the Zilman evidence, which has no empirics or examples, the 1NC evidence isolates examples like the Ukraine, where Russia attacked to maintain trade
Yeah, here it
and
says,
economic coercion.
countries trade with each other all around the globe have fought wars with one another over and over again. Some recent
Wait, and
examples are
I understand that, but I'm asking for the warrant for why two countries that trade would go war with each other.
because trade is only one factor amongst many, and trade more likely causes tensions between countries because they're scared of losing trade.
Okay.
No, because they're scared of losing their trade with each other.
It's
so they
also
go
to
to war.
maintain economic coercion by
Okay,
larger
the-
countries over
The
little countries.
first 2AC argument on cap bad was no link is not a mandate of the plan.
plan-
What does the plan mandate?
The plan manages infrastructure like in the Arctic. What do you mean?
In
Like,
Cross, you said you would defend the entire
Yeah,
red
we
deal.
said-
That's not something that you will
we
not
said
we said
do.
we're in the paradigm of the red deal.
Not the entirety of the red deal being it.
What is the difference in the paradigm of the red deal and the red deal itself?
It's the way of thinking versus the what we're actually mandating.
So do you feel that everyone thinks?
No,
Not
we
capitalist?
thought that the plan it creates infrastructures in the Arctic.
We've isolated it's a good way for the plan to be thought about
That's-
in this way.
We just think capitalism is bad in the
I'll
abstract,
get
but
back to that.
specifically,
Wait, quick flow check. On the consult counter plan, you said something about stolen land on the.
yeah, like stealing the plan is analogous to stealing like land. It's like a disad.
Okay, then the 6th point, before FPIC
on the
fails,
stolen
what was that
consult?
disad?
Suspended apocalypse disad.
What is that?
The idea is that we always try to consult and never actually do anything for indigenous groups. We suspend our like.
Okay,
Do we do on that or do you?
no, that makes sense. Then the before condo, what was that argument?
Before condo, immediacy key.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, back on case. What is, so you think of the plan through the red deal, why you, like, what's the difference in that and doing the red deal?
Doesn't abolish capitalism.
Yeah, like,
Like, do you feel that everyone is anti-capitalist, like, thinks
No.
anti-capitalist?
We have not
Do you
feel
feel that
that
people that
mindset
do the
shift.
plan think anti-capitalist?
we can't figure out mindset shift.
PIC fails argument?
On consult, let me pull it up so I can give you the exact one, but I think it's both counterpoint can't mandate plus other countries plus doesn't spill over. Yeah, that's what it is.
What's point 4 in the Spanish content?
What?
What's point 4 in the Spanish content?
Point four, let me pull it back up. Point four was can't solve root cause.
Or root cause?
Root cause, capitalism and imperialism.
Got it. Okay, please everyone give them order.
Yep.
340 by the way.
How much left, Jerry?
340.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. 340. Thank you.
3 minutes and 40 seconds.
The order will be T infrastructure, the consult counterplan,
Consult.
advantage counterplan.
Sorry, Joe, can I get that one back on?
Yeah. I think just get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Jerry, you may not. Infrastructure consult advantage. Is that it?
Case.
Case.
Oh, a stamp, levy a stamp.
No, that's, okay.
Okay, we good?
Yep.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
T infrastructure can see the definitions, they do not meet their own interpretations. When I see cross was clear, the mandate of the plan is not only to build infrastructure, but to dismantle capitalist infrastructure like oil rigs, which prove they're extra-topical. The entire aspect critique of traditional infrastructure development, it removes it. Also behind the applicant, which tells us that the paradigm of the real deal is. It is obviously a mandate of the act, and if they do meet the vote on the plan is worse than the status quo. And they do not, making infrastructure does not meet, rather increasing infrastructure in the Arctic, they don't do that because they remove infrastructure like capitalism, which makes the act a reduction. That means that the standards matter. Reasonability is not a question of we meet, it is a question of counterprestations, which means you discard it, the consult counter plan. Conditionality is good. One negation theory, the role of negatives through the plan, not depend on straight turn account plans is unpredictable because this has to account not with the plan is a good idea. 2 is negative plans, key to application to 2AC tricks and shiftiness. 3 is innovation causes risk aversion instead of experimentation because counterplans like extremely straight turn. 4 is diminishing returns of more off, do not mean there are limited amounts of off against each app, which means they can't proliferate off in the first place. 5 is excuse inevitable TK, which case are inherently conditional. 6 reject the argument, not the team. The advanced counterplan. The advantage counterplan solves for the entirety of the case for our evidence. Their evidence assumes individualized implementation in a vacuum, but only our evidence prices in simultaneous implementation of subsidization, resource caps, and carbon tax at the same time. That's our Walkiness evidence. Subsidization solves. It resolves the warrants why renewables are not profitable by directly funding it. And the resource caps argument also solves it limits the amount of fossil fuels that can be used directly, which caps how much is possible to emit and causes a faster shift to renewables. The carbon tax also solves it's the only way to reach climate goals. It results in massive emissions reductions and economy-wide innovation because there's a structural incentive to not emit carbon. And 2AC1 was to counterplan that severs the part of the red deal. Second, the combination of planks that links to the cap good. 3 was that it's key to fast reduction, but our evidence priced that and says that with aggressive policies of the counterplan, it can quite rapidly decouple growth from emissions. 4 was that it is root cause. It's wrong. Capital cap good turn proves that it is not the root cause. 5 is do both. It still it links to the capitalism good turn, and the card only says that transition is a black box which gives you nothing. 2C was a carbon tax. So it does for renewables, that's odd. And 2AC6 and 7, that'll be on the turn case. Capitalism is good. It solves climate change, several warrants. Scale. Economies and scale enable reductions in fuel dominance. Localized paradigms that occur throughout small systems cannot occur fast enough to solve. Efficiency. Reuse and minimizations are cheap. That works with ecological ceilings. It's proven by emissions per capita decreasing from 1990 to 2015 and decoupling in 33 countries. Profit creates rapid incentives and transition energy sources. We won't run out of resources. Reserves are 25 more than predicted levels. And innovation. Precision agriculture, digitalization, and building materials have drastically reduced raw materials necessary, which means that you should prefer our empirical evidence over their assertions that tech cannot solve. The act precludes that. A paradigm of anti-capitalism diverts focus from actionable innovation. That's Mitter and Grosso. The 2AC first argument was renewables fail because of profitability. That's wrong. 1 is actually the link. 2AC1 was the no link. Cross-X proves that they offend the Burr paradigm of it, and because the term disproves the idea that we should reject capitalism in the way we think, that obviously means that we disprove the app. They've said it's something they defend, so we get to garner offense off of it, and at worst we treat it like K, which is good to question the epistemology of their offense. Next, 2AC2 was renewables fail. It's renewables solve. 1 is that was above, and 2 is a shift. Renewables will come cheaper than emissions per our evidence. There's this trying to apply the example of one company solve capitalism. 2022. Renewables come easily cheapest first green transition will create jobs that create professions will require different levels of schooling scale, social 20s, improving relation between capitalism and environment progress. We will see technological innovations. 2, insurance natural disasters are too expensive. 2025. Climate crisis on the ways to destroy capitalism, whether it impacts financial sector, unable to financial services from a viable core business, it will heat water, destroy capital, lose flood value, cities limit capital assets are degrading, risk to the very foundation, there's a climate-induced crunch. The cost of reaction is higher than the cost of transformation and adaptation. 3, skip that. Next was the coercive law. That's wrong. Competition spurs emission reductions. Lower renewable costs push market forces towards renewables. It's proven by a 90% reduction in EV cost, which forces legacy competitors to shift their consumer demand. That's our meta evidence. And competition is key to innovation. Only decentralized market-based innovation can overcome the knowledge problem. The income in June 21. Widespread obstacles to the knowledge system information and security best use cases, which never exist in today's form, but spurs complete contradictory information. Is unique, never changing, plan to discern marketplace is to produce a better outcomes than actually planned because mobilized to increase knowledge, price signals, transaction, organization, problems, timing, markets kind of evolving will inevitably be different, will likely change again. That independently solves risks, Calian 3. Positive nationality could have increased the cost of pandemics, black swan research from becoming essential threat, hence innovation receptive and more explicit as spread, investment or planning from the problematic late introduction threats, research to go a long way threats, might be extra from one where that could meet quickly made vaccines and has mortality post actions, acrobatic criminality, invisible and catastrophic disaster urgency may be needed before it is too late. Next was greenwashing. 1, this does not answer empirics. The companies were really just faking it. Emissions would not be going down. 2, the greenwashing argument is a horseshoe theory. All empirical evidence supports the effectiveness of a carbon tax. Q21. Progressive believes that carbon tax fake pollution. Those claims are eerily similar to false claims about extremely right and following the face of decades of empirical research. Empirical evidence from carbon tax scheme is robust. Carbon taxes reduce carbon dioxide emissions. 2ACED was that it does not solve war, capitalism, but capitalism statistically averts conflict. 1, linear regression of 222 conflicts concludes that trade relations drastically reduce the rate of war. That's still meant. Slowdown escalates Ukraine. And 2 is wealth loss. Capitalist interests do not drive war, they prevent it. Iraq war is a neg example. So 3. Now it's proof that war is one of the biggest causes of wealth loss for the rich, low same place as the price actual value destruction of foreign assets contributed to the capitalists with the biggest pollution and confirmed intelligent analysis. I have a clear conclusion. There is no evidence the U.S. and oil industry beat the drum of Iraq. If the opposite was true, there is no evidence that the U.S. made any attempt to award American corporations. The main reason was a precedent by demonstrating military might. 3 is profitability. Capitalist commerce reduces the incentives to conquer territories profit. So 3. Capitalism significantly reduces economic benefits of conquering economy stack. 2 secure raw materials play important role, but changes make different challenges. Real screen lead through commerce. Singapore's lower no deposit in GDP of 5.5 cents. The Russia explanation. Singapore is the most capitalist and first in the economic index. 4 is value and empirics. The correlation between growth and conflicts is backward. It's greater in America than 4. Economic freedom links to small government capture rents, smaller price, less conflicts, rule of law is crucial, foster values that conduct peace, pro-social tolerance, transaction, business relations. The number of human studies for capital species 1950, 1992, fighting open conflict, low levels of conflict. And next was interdependence fails. Interdependence does prevent war. Economic ties raises the opportunity cost of war and is statistically correlated with democratic governance, which prevents war. That's Stillman. And the statistic literature review agrees. Capitalism solves war through costly signaling and interdependence. Their arguments that trade is weak ignore the fact that the scale of conflicts has gone down. Covert L4-25. Based on SLR inverse relationship between interdependence and war, explain the opportunity cost signaling argument, assassination, bargaining, use of political leads, war exposed quickly, in real estate dependency of subordinate pathway. Nevertheless, conflicts are placed by small non-military independence gives
leaders of foreign agency countries without having to make action, critique, opportunity, cost argument is weaker only seems to be true in non-military conflicts. Socialist movements destroy that. It destroys trade alliances and fuels imperial expansion. Coped in 4. Anti-capitalist movement control relationships and alliances lead to protection, status, economic competition, tensions, imperial expansion, countries planning to trade, conflict go to war through country consequences, damage to cooperation, security, technology, infrastructure, and development, increased trust and tensions. Next was Zittelman is bad. He cites empirics, which proves that it's a valid argument, and you have to respond to the warrants of it. Next was capitalism solves the least poverty. That's wrong. Our evidence is definitive in saying that capitalism has decreased middle poverty. One is that socialist governments have really led to millions of deaths. 5 years plan and Putin's plans and Stalin's revolution all proves that millions of people have died from revolutions and social means of production because centralized planning is inefficient and unable to replicate the effect of the free market, which has led to millions starving. 2, it is not zero sum. Gains are cumulative across the system because the wealth is distributed even if it is unequal. That's our Zittelman evidence, which proves that even if there's inequality, it means that the net amount of poverty has gone down. Next was the equality stuff, answered that above, and next was sustainability. The warrant that is overaccumulation, that's wrong. Going 20. New financial bubbles forming neoliberalism based on power structures that mean and technical crisis mean the automatic field changes from the politics system don't have the strength to bring about radical challenge. And it is not colonial. 1, the counterplan bans mining on indigenous land without consent. That engages indigenous people, which proves it possible to grow the economy without colonialism. Also extend that on the counterplan. 2, capitalism disadvantages colonial powers. It's historically proven. Zittelman 3. Another thesis among capitalism rooting colonialism, initiative victims of colonialism, its own colonial activity empire, colonial source material, domestic products, physical power reports, that capitalism, rich, contributing, become wealthy, even though that colonial territories. 3, anti-capitalist movement. And yeah, I'm good.
All right, you're good. Can I send that real quick?
Yes.
Thank you, Jerry.
Let me know when you're good.
Make sure he has it. I'm good. Are you ready?
I'll have it.
Hold on. Working on it.
Shouldn't do it.
No, I didn't send
You did
it.
send
I
it?
was just.
This is
I just got it.
All right.
Pretty good.
very good.
Yeah.
I guess you're ready to talk about EVs. Where do they get the minerals?
Like the counter plan, if you're asking if it's like about extracting on indigenous land, it
I'm
bans
not
mining on
asking that part,
indigenous
right? I'm asking about, in general, how do they get the minerals? Like, mining the minerals, does that not cause CO2 pollution?
It mines from places with mineral deposits, and we
Well,
argue
I
that it
get
doesn't
that.
because we've cited historical examples of decoupling in many countries.
Yeah,
In
but like,
addition to
whenever you
that,
mine
we think
stuff,
that
you use
the
massive,
process
like,
of mining
industrial
actually
machines,
reduces-
like, I guess.
Like, even if mining does have some emissions, we think the transfer to renewable technology means that we can do that with cleaner technology in the future. And additionally, our evidence points to examples that even though EV
What?
technology does use electricity, which could be generated from coal plants, it says that
I'm
overall
not worried
the
as much
amount
about the
of
coal plant
emissions
thing. I'm
has
worried about
decreased.
let's like the EVs, for example, like biggest EV company, Tesla. Tesla mines a ton of lithium, like that includes a ton. Like how do you avoid like mining a ton of like rare earth elements and other minerals that cause massive amounts of pollution?
We don't think we need to win that mining has always historically been.
Yeah, but I'm not
because our
supposed to.
evidence
You just
still-
need to win the like.
Yeah, our evidence indicates that it accounts for that, and it accounts for the emissions
What-
from
wait,
mining.
it-
and
what part of the card
third
accounts for
energy
mining?
production. That's the one in C card, the meta card.
The
Do you want me
accounts
to
for
read you
mining?
lines?
I don't think it accounts for like all REM mining, but that's okay. I guess on the counter plan, how does it solve like Alaska?
Solve Alaska.
Like how does it solve Alaska? Like the
How do I solve
towns
Alaska?
falling off the side of Alaska right now?
Plants. What, sorry.
Like okay, so like the counter plan happens, right?
Right.
We start doing like carbon taxes and a bunch of other things. I guess how does what part of the counter plan do you think happens so fast that it reverses climate change fast enough to prevent the
We
impacts
think
of
the
the
market signals are fast. In addition to that,
I mean, I guess we have to harvest the minerals, they gotta transport them, they gotta make the REMs, then everybody's gotta adopt them. My question is like, what part of the counter plan do you think is fast enough to resolve the impacts?
that process is happening right now. We've read evidence that decoupling has occurred in several countries. Second is that the counter plan rapidly increase that rate. Our evidence indicates that it is not just one policy, but several policies that are implemented at the same time. Subsidies, a carbon tax, a resource cap, which would mean that companies don't only have like the access, they don't have just a choice to incorporate more green technologies, but rather the resource caps on fossil fuels, as well as the carbon tax makes it.
So I guess
it's
I kind of the resource cap, so it prevents companies from doing what exactly?
It's a certain amount of fossil fuel can only be used, and so
Okay.
it's a cap on the amount of fossil fuels.
So I guess how does that not, like, you write a bunch of innovation stuff, do you not think that like somehow stops innovation?
We think that it could somewhat impede economic growth, but our evidence indicates that over the long term, it would still lead to economic growth.
Okay, that makes sense to me. On, I guess, the war stuff, the Zumpin card is talking about like wars between like the year like 1800, like 1900, like a long time ago. Why do you think that applies today?
Also cites more recent examples. So one of the
Really?
examples that your card, Robinson, indicates is
I didn't read
the
Robinson
war,
card.
and
Oh,
also,
Robinson card.
the one you read in the 2AC.
What?
It's just consult.
Just consult. Just
Is everyone good?
Give me 1 second.
You good?
No. So I'm currently using Michael's little brother's computer, and I hit screen time on Microsoft Excel.
Wait, do you need to flow on something?
We're getting the screen time request approved.
Oh, I can.
I forgot totally turn off that. I might have to do that.
Well,
I think I might have my own brother's computer somewhere.
how does it Microsoft? How do you screen time on? That's not real quick. All right, Bear. Bear's time to go home. It's too late.
Alright, we're good.
We're good. All right.
Okay.
What's the order?
It's just consult. Okay. Anyone not good?
Good.
Okay. The counterplan uses free, prior, and informed consent process outlined by the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People over the plan. Shifts the use of current adherence to FPIC as solely telling Indigenous people before a policy is passed to genuinely giving veto power and incorporating feedback. That's Fusco. That spills over and is modeled globally because the US sent a signal on the baseline for what adherence to FPIC looked like. That's Frederick. 2AC1 was text and function. Counterplans only need to be functionally competitive. 1, arbitrariness. It's unpredictable to design competition off of words divorced from meaning. Otherwise, we do it off a sentence link. 2, scrabble perms. Textual competition creates unbeatable perms by rearranging the set letters in the perm to fiat world peace. 3, net ground. Textual competition makes ban the plan and counterplans. They compete off of core topic mandates uncompetitive. If it turns into a voter crossfire visibility from T. 2AC2 with perm to the counterplan. Top level. Every perm that includes the plan is bad. Status quo consultation is empty and fraudulent. Only the counterplan solves that, but the counterplan competes. The topic requires certainty and immediacy. Resolved. First is resolved. Same word dictionary. No date. Resolved to make a decision formally with determination. Second is should. Settlers 18. Then the word should be mandatory. Is to be met now. Not at a later time. Duties are not operational. But now the definition is bad. Prefer 1, net ground. Certain and immediacy. Implementation is necessary for disabling. Otherwise, delaying the offense to the next session of Congress. 0 is offense. 2, rollback. Inherency means opposition to the plan with 0 its chance of passing. Neg on presumption. Even if they win their definition of should, the counterplan still competes. 1, should is a normative statement to indigenous cooperation. Even if the exacted mandated action could be uncertain, the counterplan's binding commitment to the consent of indigenous people first fundamentally is distinct with their normative commitment. Even when you say the United States should deploy icebreakers, but it won't, you are still committing yourself to deploying icebreakers unconditionally being a good idea. 2, the plan would be changed to the process of FPIC by relevant indigenous decision makers, making it functionally distinct. Independently, you should vote neg on T. The plan only mandates talking to indigenous people, never actually developing anything in the Arctic, which is untopical because they can use funds for protecting areas from development and mixes burdens because topicality is tied to solvency of if indigenous groups say yes. The plan is negatively topical. Maybe it only maybe funds indigenous development, and after consultation it maybe develops in the Arctic or maybe bans further development. The affirmative must not define the topical conditional plan that hinging solvency on the consent of hired actors. It violates should as the normative statement. Grattan 25. Normative statements reflect moral judgment. Government should provide health care. Normative statement. Claim for and value judgment. 2AC3 was a stolen land disad. 1, device question of competition. If we win that it's a state, then no disad. 2, the counterplan does not steal. It alters the entire method through which the plan is done, which is what the 1AC has said, one of the most important parts. 2AC4 with other issues. 1, it's functionally intrinsic. The counterplan's consultation is limited to the plan. The perm mandated consultation on an external issue, even if it's specified by normal means. 2, it doesn't meet the burden of proof. Proves the plan is not enough to resolve the impacts. 3, can't solve. FPIC on the plan is key to prevent having knowledge stolen or misrepresented. 4, can't solve the net benefit. Vagueness of consultation matter will be done on a nebulous and trivial policy to avoid FPIC principles in the future. 5, at worst, even if they win the rest of their offense, they should specify normal means of the perm. It's key to neg offense against it. 2AC5 was do both. Do both fails. 1, the counterplan mandate of binding includes starting the plan now. Cambridge Dictionary 13, binding an agreement that cannot be legally avoided. 2, it doesn't solve veto power. The plan happens before indigenous people are consulted on it. 3, other countries will also disregard its rules. That's Seal 17. Tribes don't exercise self-government in the U.S. affirms inherent authority of tribes. There will be issues also mandates have tribal officers, can utilize justified has important consequences international law. U.S. serves as a model for the indigenous relations. The will of the U.S. and travel sovereignty has itself determination increasingly applied in law policy around the world. 2AC6 was infinite consultation. Just add 1 doesn't apply here. We concede consent as a quote precondition to doing the plan that implies that the plan happens next. 2 consent is good. Their argument devolves into don't get consent, which is actively violent and exclusionary of indigenous needs. 2AC7's FPIC fails. 1 the counterplan does not mandate FPIC, sure, but rather it engages in prior and genuine consent with indigenous people in the Arctic. Our Frederick evidence indicates a clear distinction between consent and consultation. It says that consent overcomes the colonial approach between the state and cultural minorities and allows discernment between true participation and tokenization consultation. It says that consensus and veto power is important, and specifically says that consultation is not that. 2 other countries and no spillover group them. A, they don't solve insofar as they're not following UNDRIP now either. B, Frederick is really good. It says that the U.S. is a quote test case to quote guide and influence lawmakers. The U.S. has signaled commitment but hasn't followed through. Only the plan signals law and policy that views consent as required, not just optional. 2AC8 with the multiple worlds firm. It's nonsense. 1 the counterplan is one world where the results are probabilistic. 2 it's intrinsic. It has element of splitting uniqueness worlds after the consultation. 3 that's several for debate. Eliminating counterplans complete. Still plan means butterfly effect. 0 is neg fiat. 4 even if they win it, we get to weigh the world of say no, even if it's 0.1%. That's bad because they would go against indigenous consent to forcibly extract research. The risk that they say no is a neg argument because it means that we're actually heeding to indigenous demands rather than just doing what we think that they want and then not getting consultation and telling them that we do it and then do it anyways, whatever, no matter what they say. Say no. That means that say no is a neg argument here. 2AC9 was immediacy key. 1 immediacy is not key. Climate change is long term and is better to gather real consent over the plan and to do it haphazardly. 2 immediacy key is exactly the wrong frame and the one that we have critiqued. The idea that everything is so urgent that we don't have time to ask the people whose land the plan affects whether or not they are okay with it is exactly what fake consultation and status quo is actually. I forgot it. T. Even if they cross the definition of sustainable development, that's wrong. The second piece of evidence signed sustainable development, not just development, which is without resolution. Solutions used for the first definition, which we conceded because it includes any action that could be good.
Alright. Did I send that out? Alright, thank you. Alright, thank you. We'll wait for it to get it, but should be soon. Alright, just got it. You good? Alright, starting prep now.
325.
325 left.
Is everyone good for now? The advantage. C infrastructure. The advantage counterpoint. And then the competition counterpoint. Does anyone get a second time? Yep. The order. Is the advantage. T infrastructure. The advantage counterpoint. And then the counterpoint that completes off C2 and Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kyson. How do you find that funny?
Everyone good?
Miles.
Is the advantage, the topicality argument, the advantage counterpoint, the uncompetitive consultation. Do you need that again, Miles?
Okay, we're going.
Advantage.
No, we're good.
Advantage counterpoint. Consult.
Just go.
Yeah, exactly.
Miles, I'm starting the 1 hour sign this.
All right.
Anyone not ready? Vote act to endorse critical infrastructure development through the paradigm of the Red Deal. That means adopting the Red Deal's understandings of empowering indigenous voices while creating infrastructure that prevents the mass death of the native Alaska community. They have functionally dropped the case, only extending captain is not responsible. They drop solvency and the role of the ballot argument in the 2AC. The role of the ballot is to prevent indigenous suffering. It does not matter if they resolve terminal extinction. If we win a risk, they're not able to access the case. That means you vote out because there's no reason the affirmative is not able to access solvency independently. You can vote out to affirm transitioning away from capitalism. If they are right about the link debate, a transition away from capitalism is good. Now we'll do capitalism debating here. The first warrant for voting out is unsustainability. Drop 1AC Red Nation says even if capitalism transition towards renewables, it's still terminally unsustainable because where we get minerals from and their finite amount also says we continue to destroy indigenous land in the name of capitalist exploitation. That is a drop warrant for the 2AC, which means even if the counterclaim bans it, mining on indigenous communities, it still results in destruction of indigenous land, which is the only thing that you should be concerned about because of concessions of the role of the ballot argument. 2, the conflict drive. Even if trade can create temporary solutions to conflict, long-term profit outweighs it and drives companies towards lobbying, starting wars. Only our evidence gives you actual terminal impact scenarios. Their evidence is a bunch of grandstanding pertaining to wars without a specific conflict escalation scenario. Now, climate, I'll do it here. Multiple warrants for the 2AC. The first, profitability. Renewals are profitable under a capitalist economy. No monopolies lobby against them. Drop the oils monopoly lobby against them more, which answers their evidence because even if there's possibility of moving away, they have dropped their oil monopolies, will dump money into keeping them from being able to do a B coercive law. Capitalist competition creates a group think where companies are unwilling to save their environment. This is separate from renewables, means that companies in general would rather be bad than good. See, greenwashing claims about companies doing good or greenwashing to maintain their capital system. Companies will lie about what they are doing to make consumers feel good. Be skeptical of block evidence without empirics because funded by big capitalism. D, in mineral extraction. Any kind of policy under capitalism will result in massive mining. E, Jerry dropped the S enrollment 21 evidence. That means you know they can't solve because capitalism inherently makes it impossible. They also drop transitions inevitable, which means the land can make it not bad. This also takes out all of their offense because whether or not you vote after nay, capitalism will be destroyed. It's only a question of a sustainable transition for indigenous people. They also drop God starves everybody. That means you know that it starves the world. Now the next now they say socialism bad. Never asked to claim socialism. They said Stalin as an example. Be so real. These arguments are about what have happened in past movements. Don't prove that the infrastructure the app builds will be a bad thing. The mindset shift fiat stuff is nonsense, and we'll do the no link debate here. The plan's mandate is not to abolish capitalism, rather to adopt policies. The paradigm of the Red Deal as the starting point about how policies are implemented. That means no link to cap good, but we still access solvency pertaining to the case. Now you can group the first set of arguments. They can group the first set of arguments without renewables. It is not citing any empirical examples, but just says that capitalism could potentially shift towards renewables, but not answer the empirics from our evidence, which is a case that will never occur, or they will lie about shifting towards renewables, and they cannot access solvency, or they cannot access solvency pertaining to it. Also, there's no terminal impact being access to trade because they have not one unique reason why the plan's singular instance of anti-capitalism is able to access or destroy all of trade, which means you know that the risk of terminal impact is relevant, but trade does not matter because they conceded the role of the ballot argument. It's topicality. We mean our counter-interpretation so many of the plan is to build infrastructure. One do not say we eliminate types of infrastructure, but that some infrastructure is not built or no interprets topical because that removes infrastructure subsequently build infrastructure, which would mean that no affirmative is able to meet under their interpretation. The re-highlight is terrible. It just says that some infrastructure is bad, not that the mandate of the plan is abolishing it. I implore you to go read it. It is genuinely bad. The 2NC did not extend an impact to their interpretation, but default app because only we have a model of the debate pertaining to it. The first is over-limiting. Drop that their interpretation over-limits apps on a topic that is structurally negative bias. There is no contextual affirmative solvency advocates and limited mechanisms, which give them a year of target shooting. Give them a year of target practice. 2, drop functional limit. This should frame your offense because even if the affirmative mandate is potentially non-topical, they still have functional limits like process, the cap K, and other core negative generics that are just pertaining to doing action, which means they can still access it, Now, reasonability should frame your ballot because provided we reasonably have a risk of beating the counter-interpretation, you should vote affirmative because they have not won enough of a terminal impact pertaining to non-topicality. Also, voting ballot might not work this will try. Advantage counter. Capitalism is a disadvantage. We are winning. The capitalism is bad in the long term. They're also not able to access. They are not able to access solvency. Carbon tax is circumvented by companies. That has dropped analytics from the 2AC, and it takes too long to invest in renewable energy to be able to access short-term solvency. Is the case now. The Alaska descent are not able to resolve quickly enough for Alaska. Time frame should matter because indigenous communities are dying in the status quo. That is a drop warrant from the 2AC, which means that your only question should be who is able to resolve faster. There's also no warrant as to why it's able to solve capitalism, which we've isolated as the root cause of indigenous suffering because it causes climate change, but also causes systems of imperialism.
Yeah, imperialist. There you go.
That's all. No topicality argument. The plan's mandate is to create infrastructure within the Arctic. The Red Deal has already done consultation, which means that it does not violate the sovereignty stuff to drop to perm through the plan through the counterplans process. No arguments here because no cost applicably pertaining to it. But the counterplan cooperates. The counterplan still does the process, but mandates going through it. They've read say but mandates the plan still happening. That is genuine and still binding. It is not the lie permutation, which means that cross applications pertaining to that do not answer it. And the BDC is key. The Red Nations has already done consultation and says that right now native Alaska groups are falling off the side of theirs. Cross apply the spender plug set here. We keep doing consultation even though it's already happened, making our lives inevitable. There's also no spillover. Other countries will inevitably ignore the FPIC. Our 1AC evidence says that Canada's actively genociding natives in the status quo with no warrants from the 2AC as to why they're able to access spillover pertaining to Canada because they will just continue genociding, which means they're not able to access terminal solvency. And if one group says no to the counterplan, that means that no indigenous groups are able to get access to it because they could be lobbied by big oil. You can cross apply that from the 2AC. Drop lobbying, which means that they can lobby indigenous groups to say no to the counterplan, but they can't. But they do not want to say no. They just need to do it for the money under capitalism, which only we're able to access solvency for. You cannot drop roll without.
case.
Case consult.
Yeah.
Right. I'm allergic to a glue, so I'll just cheese.
Sorry. T case. Got it.
Yes.
Yay.
The one answer the counter-interpretation, but we conceded their counter-interpretation. We explicitly said that their first interpretation means development can only include buildings and building those infrastructures. The Rubini argument is completely wrong. They remember when I say cross-sex, the thing that I asked about the most was fracking, and they said that certain infrastructure like fracking could not be repurposed, and that the app would cede indigenous sovereignty, so that they would remove the purposes they would remove institutions and certain types of infrastructure like fracking, which means for a fact you know that the app removes infrastructure, does not just build it. You do not need to remove infrastructure just to build it, because obviously you can build things in new places without having to remove old ones. This means that Rubini is a non-starter. All the stuff about interpretation does not matter, and reasonability does not matter as well, because it's all a question of counter-interpretation. Because the warrant for reasonability is to exclude app post hoc, but we have not extended our own interpretation that is exclusive with theirs, because we conceded theirs, and that means that when I say cross-sex, you know they do not meet, and we do not need to extend impacts because they have set an interpretation for themselves. They have set a resolution of burden that the burden of proof must meet, which means that even if you think that the role of the ballot is to vote for the team that best resolves criminal harm, you cannot solve for the you still have to vote for them, because that means they've independently not met the burden of proof, which is still separate. The case. Oh yeah, functional limits are also zero because there's no counter. The case. I will concede that there's no link because there's only one instance of the red deal, which means it cannot solve for broader capitalism. The consult counterplan. The consult counterplan has functionally no deficit because they conceded all the reasons why consultation is good and the Red Nation does not speak for all indigenous people. It solves better going through a process of free, prior, and binding informed consent is best. The U.S. interpretation of it right now only means that they inform indigenous people before they do an action, and the counterplan means that there's a binding consent which sets precedent for the U.S. to continue doing it in the future. That means that the U.S. is stuck to a notion of having to defend human rights so that they will consult indigenous people in the future. The net benefit is conceded, which means you know that the only argument they make is that it cannot solve internationally, which means that at least you know that it solves for further prior consent in the United States. They obviously can only do things in Alaska, but the counterplan resolves a net benefit that affects the entirety of indigenous people in the United States, which is best. And first, I'll answer the arguments here. First was that they already asked if they went through the process consultation. This is obviously wrong because the Red Nation does not speak for all indigenous people. So it's still best to go through a process consultation to make sure that the plan is good and helpful for every indigenous person, not just people in that wrote the red deal. Second is that permission to do the process of the permutation plan through the process of counterplan, but they conceded that should is a certain and immediate. This means that this is certainly severs because it means that the plan is delayed to happen after the process of consultation for the counterplan, or it links to all of our answers to do both. They've also quickly conceded definitions of should and resolve must be certain and conceded scheme net ground because otherwise they'll just go delay the app to be all the politics DAs and means there's zero net ground. The 2AR is not going to say a word on this because they've conceded it. And otherwise it means it links the answers to do both, which is also conceded, which means that because of do both means that they could be simultaneously consult indigenous people and march ahead with the plan. There's no signal of free, prior, and informed consent because it shows the U.S. government does not care about it, so it does not hold it to a standard or to that in the future. But it does solve internationally. Our evidence is very explicit and very good in saying that actors, even if they have settled colonial histories, would still follow on to the signal of the counterplan because it means that after the U.S. has had a standard of human rights, the other countries will feel pressured internationally to follow that standard, even if they have genocidal histories. And the immediacy key and consultation key stuff, they have conceded our critique of immediacy. The idea that we can have time to ask indigenous people is the reason that we're here in the first place, because if we do not ask indigenous people before we actually implement the plan, that means the plan is faulty. It cannot benefit the most amount of indigenous people because it does not actually ask and consult the broad majority of them. The next argument was that the Navy ignored the FDIC. I answered that above, but the next argument was say no. One, no car makes this claim that groups will obviously say no because capitalism makes them. That's obviously incoherent and supported by zero car. Lobbying indigenous groups is just fake. If they want something, they will say that they want it, especially if it's true that the red deal means that they will end capitalism in the future. But second is that the argument devolves down to never listen to indigenous people, because if everything indigenous people say is fake because of lobbying, then why do the plan in the first place? Why do it when the red deal was written by indigenous people? Third is that they've conceded that say no is a neg argument. If they want something done differently, we should heed to indigenous demands in the first place. And obviously, it is not just a process of saying yes or saying no. There's also a process of consultation and negotiation as well. And also, the app cannot solve for it. I've conceded the lowering of the cap which means they cannot solve for the broader instance of capitalism. So even if there are lobbies, they cannot solve
They cannot solve for it.
Also,
And
like, the app does not consult.
the app does not consult. Is different consult because in the status quo, it is only informing English people before they do something, but counterplan has binding consent. It certainly competes because they conceded that this should, and the answers to do both. They conceded that that we should consult over immediacy, and that say no is a neg argument. So the app cannot solve for any of the capital stuff, and roll the ballot is not mutually exclusive, meaning the burden of proof, so you should vote on T as well.
Maybe more functional.
Yeah, well, if there's no counter-indication, we conceded theirs.
Alright, we have how much more? 312, starting now. It's gonna be case T Caroline. Miles, you need that again? Cam, can I use your time for a microphone? Is anybody not ready? Alright. All good? Alright.
On case, 100% risk we saw, 1% risk the deficit means you vote F. Roll the ballots, vote for the team which best also digits groups. Any two arguments on why T outweighs should be the roll the ballots, do this debate, new juries 2 which means you should be after the other question. You can agree with the negative arguments, the vacuum wall, and still vote after certain digits problems in debate rounds because of they dropped the entire the block, which means that you should know that roll the ballots and solve the most digit suffering. But we'll go to T now. Our interpretation is that as must rebuild or refurbish ensure within the RT we meet the counter interpretation of the plan, sole mandate is creation of a structure where you can view this through multiple two lenses. One is the rules of this wasn't a mandate the plan, but a paradigm the red deal which could happen as a result of the plan, not a mandate. 2, functional limits check. Even the DDI counter interpretation, you know that their negative clause grounding of the act process counter plan and cap will always be generic. 3, the text of the plan if they're right on the control counter plan, that mandate should be determined by the text and the act is topical because it only mandates increasing critical. If it's sure they have at best gone for an effect of the plan is not topical. This is not a mandate. The plan is about to let the negative divine mandates of the plan, the function of the plan for the plan will be only mandate creating new structure, not removing it. We drop that. It means no applicant will be topical under their interpretation, which makes it impossible. 5, versatility should frame your ballot. You 2 like the competitive death penalty. You must be 100% sure we do not meet the characteristic to vote negative. See 6 drop. The topic is structural neg bias, which is the if any terminal impact in the tuner. I know this is not a spot for you to be in, but you should wait. I know it's an awkward spot for you to be, but you should weigh the terminal impact defense and either the negative claims. The burden proof rate is both irrelevant and new onto the counter plan. Good, Kim? Yeah. All right. Oil lobbies will lobby against the plan that leads to rejection. Not a reason indigenous people don't want the plan, but a reason they are forced to reject our capitalism. The deal better and says over there. Across the plan, the red deal is just one instance of. That means that the capital is just one instance of the FPIC, which means the total team is really low. We all agree that the red deal doesn't speak for all indigenous people. The red deal does make infrastructure for those who have already asked for it and been consulted, which is good enough to answer their but the say no stuff that they said the capital makes it non-unique, but they have conceded that no if it doesn't matter. Framing issue for the say no, they drop that only the organizing group say no is because of lobbying capitalism, which means that even if one group is paid out by BP or any massive other oil company, immediately cancel the ad. They have not quantified a deficit to you for what happens if the plan happens and your group just say no, indigenous groups say no. We have comments that oil companies are having to lobby groups that takes out all the counterpoint, which means that you know for a fact if even one indigenous group says no, that every single other indigenous group does not get the plan, which should be how you frame your ballot in this debate, because if one group can say no for all the others, you're not heeding demands, you're just heeding one group's demands and nobody else's. Purge the plan to the process of the counter plan. Having dropped in the 1 hour. It solves their offense because it still manages consults. The plan is still both during and immediate because it still manages the plan happening immediately, but after consultation, the deficit will apply here, and it's suspended apocalypse with this had. We already have consulted the groups numerous times that are need for the red deal. They just keep asking them and asking them. Immediacy is key. Caused by the Alaska step of the mandated counter plan, which means that you know the really only quantifiable deficit in this debate round is the Alaska discount because we have current evidence that say that they are now being melted off the face of the earth. The tuner has failed to explain to you what the net benefit to the counter plan is in the tuner, which means that you should focus, should be aptly on how it helps the most indigenous people because they have failed to quantify the net benefit of the counter plan. Look, they have not specified to you how the counter plan solves any of the stuff about FIC or spillover anywhere else. They've just made broad and bold assertions that actually warranting it out. We're the only team that has a certain immediacy deficit and a quantifiable deficit to the counter plan because we have current evidence that says that Alaska's indigenous groups are currently melting off the face of the earth and they need immediate infrastructure to solve that. Dropping that means that you know for a fact that the counter plan cannot solve because first of all, one group can say no for every group in Alaska, which makes solvency 0. No answer to this in the 2R means that you should frame it through the say no debate. If one group says no because of lobbying, that makes the counter plan should be 0. Kim, you should go back to C or?
Yeah, we would actually run on T.
All right. Did not do the work to win the violation of the 2R. Did not send a violation besides one AC process, which said a potential deficit effect of the plan could be less racking, not a mandate of the plan. Did not send the rehab of the app we meet their interpretation. They have dropped from evaluating a violation for with defense. That should be sufficient for half ballot with a terminal back in the 2 and R. Got enough time.
The text of the plan is fully topical. They have not won a violation.
The text of the plan is fully topical. They have not won a violation. I'm going to go back to the counter plan because this is the real 2 and R ballot, and the 2 and R does not spend 5 minutes on T. This debate should not be framed through sufficiency. It should be framed through necessity. We have a rule of ballot, which is that you should frame it through this debate through necessity of saving every single indigenous group possible. They have not quantified how the net benefit solves. They just said 2 sentences in the 2 and R, which means that you know that we have the only quantifiable deficit. If one group says no, which they have not won, that does not happen, that means that every other group does not get the plan. We've already won that the red...
Say no is not a negative one because they dropped lobbying is the reason they
Yeah.
forced to under capitalism.
Yeah, say no is not negative warrant because the reason they say no is because of lobbying under capitalism, which means that you know that say no isn't because they want to say no, but because they've been given so much money that they have to say no. Because that's the only way to strive currently, which means they say no because they get enough money from oil companies, which means that you know that the counter plan is 0 because at least one, because even one indigenous group says no that they get sold, which is not quite how many, which could be in infinite groups. That's enough for the counter plan to be 0 because one group saying no is enough for the entire plan to stop happening. None of the
Or the plan solves.
Yeah.
No cross apps for money deficits.
Or the personnel, no cross apps, but also, unlike the red deal speak for all people stuff, yeah, but the red deal does infrastructure for the groups that have already been consulted by the red deal.